So this is the 5th edition of our OCP impact study. We've also called it adoption study. Really, what we do is we try to understand these technologies that are being showed here, are they being used by the real world? So is the market actually adopting the technologies that the OCP is making? Because that's a real question. And this year, the conclusion that we made after months of research was that the impact of the OCP community is changing. So we're going to show you today first what is the impact, right? So if there is a new impact and the impact is changing, how does it look right now? And then we're going to show you some of the actual feedback that we received from the interviews. And of course, I'm going to give you a background on just how many interviews we did. So first, let's step back. Let's take 5 steps back, 5 years back, and this is kind of what we saw in 2017. So in 2017, what we saw is that the OCP community could be measured pretty easily. There was not many adopters. There was not many vendors who were making the equipment. There was not many equipment types as well. Pretty much it was just servers, storage, switches, and racks. That's kind of more or less where the OCP community stayed. And what we saw is that we could there was a few OCP recognized, for lack of a better term, equipment types. So we had the OCP accepted equipment. That's an equipment where the vendor has donated 100% of the IP, and it's completely open. Then there was the OCP inspired, and in the OCP inspired, it was a portion of that. And then you had the OCP spec that is contributed, but it's not contributed by a vendor, it's contributed by the end user, and then it's been made custom. So what we would do is we would count that. It was pretty easy to count. The revenue was pretty easy to count. The world was pretty simple. So we thought that ultimately what's going to happen is that those blue dots that you see in the center, they will grow and they will continue to fill the black portion, which is the rest of the market. Because there was a large number of POCs, there was a large number of people who were interested in trying it out. In reality, the OCP community has changed. And on one hand, the players have changed. The people who offered inspired equipment in 2017 are different from the people who offer equipment now. The people who offer accepted equipment as well are different from the people who offer it now. And the end users are also different. So the players have changed, but actually what I'll try to argue is that the game has changed as well. We believe that the OCP community has become something a little bit different than just making those OCP recognized equipment. The OCP community has become a place where we see ideas being exchanged and specifications for a broad area of IP happening. And the reason why I use IP, and the OCP Foundation didn't want me to use that word, is because I wanted to really explain how it can encompass software, and it can encompass a module, and it can encompass equipment, it can encompass physical infrastructure, and it can be both advice and just ideas and an entire spec. So in that world, we see a slightly different kind of segmentation and something, an evolution that's occurred. So first, there's still these people who have an OCP spec that no one's building and no one's adopting. They're getting a custom build. We think that that's going to continue to happen. I'm sure you can guess who those people are. And then you're still going to have OCP accepted equipment that is being deployed by a few end users. We think that there's not going to be many vendors who will actually contribute their entire equipment to be OCP accepted. And the OCP inspired category, we think, will also shrink a bit. And what's actually going to increase significantly is the OCP influenced equipment. And when I say OCP influenced equipment, here I see several types. So one is the OCP equipment that someone's taken the specifications and they've built on it, right? So they might have changed it slightly. They might have improved it in a way, and then they are deploying it. But that was not a part of the original imagination of the conception of the project when we started in 2017. It's currently not in scope of the market model. So when you see a number, that number does not currently include OCP influenced equipment. And then similarly, the OCP standardized modules have become so popular The OCP has done a really good job, the community, of actually creating components of different types of equipment that can be used and reused, and they can be used in open compute equipment, but they can be used also in non-open compute equipment, in traditional equipment. That is a measured market, and you will see that we think that this market will actually be bigger than what we originally anticipated. So the OCP is changing, which is good. It is actually becoming more influential in a way. Not all of the influence will be visible in our market model, and I think that's important for you to know before I show you the model. And another thing that it's important to note is that the market fundamentals between 2017 and now have changed a lot. I think that we all live it, we all know about it. One of the things that is not the microeconomy is the server lifecycle. So the server lifecycle has significantly increased. When we spoke for the first time in 2017, we saw that the server lifecycle was on a gradual decline. The cloud service providers were using their servers for a very short amount of time at that particular moment. We were even seeing a year and a half of a life cycle in some cases, but they have gradually been increasing their life cycle, and they have actually driven the increase of the life cycle of servers in the overall market. So, of course, this has an impact. And then the supply chain has also been quite turbulent. We've been through times of significant memory price increases, then big drops in price. But the thing that really had a big impact in 2021 was the availability of components. So last year, we did have a worse than expected supply situation of components. We did think that there would be some recovery, at least in some component types by the end of the year. That didn't occur. We have seen some recovery in 2022. For example, switches have had a big bounce back last quarter. If you want to discuss them, Manoj from my team over there in the front can talk to you about it. Actually, maybe my team can stand up for a sec. I have three of the analysts in Omdia who kind of lead the different parts. So Manoj does computing and networking. Dominika does cloud services and SD-WAN, and Moises can talk to you to any physical equipment, physical infrastructure topic, but he really is excellent at power and cooling, including the hot topic of liquid cooling, which last year people grilled him on for about 10 minutes. So supply chain was worse than we anticipated. And oh, I just realized I'm not advancing my slides. And then what's worse than anticipated was also the microeconomy. So when we came last year at the OCP, we were on a trajectory of recovery from COVID, but actually straight after the OCP, we did see a resurgence. There was wave after wave after wave after wave, which delayed a lot of enterprise investment. Every year we survey over 5,000 enterprises, and we asked them about their investment priorities, and they told us that actually, they are cutting budgets. So it was a worse than expected budget year. So that set of new fundamentals kind of has a very interesting mix when you mix it with what's happening at the community level. So this is kind of the ultimate result. So the ultimate result is we have revised two things. We've revised our forecast down. Ultimately, we still think that the market will double. And we've changed the mix. So about 70% of our earlier forecast was driven by server revenue, the shipments of servers. In reality, what we have seen is that some of the server efforts or the server updates have not been as market popular as were originally expected. That has had an impact on the market. And we can give many, many examples. Unfortunately, if I get into it, we're going to run out of time. But Manoj here is available to sit down and talk afterwards. Even some of the really big flagship deployment use cases that we saw last year on the stage ended up choosing to deploy OCP at the edge, but not in their main data center, which had a really big impact on the pull for servers that we saw that are OCP recognized. But what we've seen is that all of the rest of the components that make up the OCP ecosystem, like the switches, the networking, the routers, the NICs, are growing are being adopted in an extremely positive way. Similarly, the OCP rack is actually quite popular. I mean, obviously you've seen that Google have been very interested in it. What we've been seeing is that the OCP rack is being deployed with non-OCP servers in it. So the servers have been kind of custom made to fit the 21-inch enclosure, but they're not something that you're seeing here on the floor. So ultimately, a really big kind of impact that is in a different way now happening. It's different types of equipment. And then the other category that you see, which is significantly larger, represent all of the modules. The modules really, we believe, are creating kind of a different marketplace for the OCP. So in the other category and in the peripherals category, it's on purpose, I've put them in a similar color. You will see stuff like the OCP NICs, as I mentioned. You will see the Open Acceleration Module. These are pretty popular, and we think that they will continue to be for quite a while. The cell-side gateway is also in that other category. These have actually been pretty successful products. In my opinion, it's actually good that the OCP, that the adoption of OCP equipment is more diverse than it used to be before. When you have a market that has 70% of it is one product and 2 clients make up 90% of the deployment, it's a pretty volatile market. Those 2 people can decide not to buy that one product, and then suddenly you don't have a market. While when you have a market that's kind of more spread and there's more people buying the product and they're different products, it's actually a much safer environment. So let's talk about who's buying it, right? Because I think that is the big question. And I need to figure out how to move this. So we have seen that, again, this year, the largest client is the hyperscale cloud service provider, but we continue to see tier 2 cloud service providers deploy it. And when we spoke to vendors, we heard, again, that communication service providers are deploying it. We have also continued to see a large number of commitments from really large communication service providers that they will, in the future, adopt it, which is why we have this forecast. But we also continue to see that financial and insurance, an established vertical that we know of, and government, another established vertical, are deploying the OCP. And this year, we saw some very large scale deployments at media and entertainment companies and at let's call it retail, but at a known retailer who was here last year. And then, at a small scale, there's been demand from across the market. So let me just show you quickly what do those end users say about the OCP. So during August and September, we conducted a series of interviews. They were pretty in-depth with 25 OCP vendors and end users. And then we asked them, what they think about it. And the sample was very carefully selected so that it can be as diverse as possible. People who come from any industry, who adopt any equipment, or who make any equipment. So the first thing that we asked is, what are the top adoption drivers? And they were pretty much the same as what we saw 7 years ago, to be honest. And every year we've heard this being reiterated. I hope you're not sick of hearing me say it at this point, but openness, cost effectiveness, and energy efficiency continue to be the top 2 drivers. The barriers are also the same as they were 7 years ago, which actually is an indication that there is an issue in solving some of the barriers: servicing and support, volume requirement, and familiarity in supply chain. Interestingly enough, I think that the OCP Experience Center has an opportunity to fix that number 3, the familiarity barrier, but I am very concerned about the supply chain barrier, which has been there for 5 years already, and it's not going away. Then from a top technologies being deployed, what's changed this year is we saw that edge-ready equipment has actually taken a huge step up. And this is very, it's been coming, but it was very interesting to see it actually happen. So the open edge design, the open edge server is very popular. A few years ago when we interviewed Nokia, they told us that they're seeing a lot of enterprise interest outside of the communication service provider segment, and this is true. This is happening. This showed that. And then finally, the deployment location. What you can see is that even though the central data center is at number 1, it used to be 100%. While now there is a huge number of telco edge and enterprise edge there, which would have been 0 when we did our first study 5 years ago. So finally, what we found is that in terms of deployment size or deployment type, there was no one size fits all. We saw deployment types of every size, many that are less than 20 servers, and then we saw deployments of over 50 that are occurring. And then similarly, in terms of the composition of compute versus storage, which is an indication of the types of workloads that are running, we also saw a pretty wide mix. So that's pretty much it. I think I have maybe time for one quick question, but otherwise we can step out and have a chat outside. And I've specifically left there an email for Ask an Analyst if you want to ask a question offline instead of online here.